Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, and welcome to another episode of the Headphone Hoedown, bringing the series back with a vengeance. Moondrop is no stranger to the headphone and IEM space, and being a planar headphone fanboy myself, I jumped at the opportunity to review their latest planar release, at least until the Laputa was announced recently. These headphones are the Para 2, the logically named sequel to the original Moondrop Para, with a price increase at $500 US. They feature an updated 100mm planar driver as well as new ear pads coming from the Cosmo. Does the Para 2 make sense in what is becoming an increasingly crowded planar market? Let's find out. As usual, quick disclaimer, these Para 2 are on loan from Apos Audio for review. They do have to go back at the end of filming, but since I didn't have to pay for these, gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature as usual. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency, especially when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thanks again to Apos for loaning me this set and for supporting the channel, and thank you all of you watching for your continued support. We'll go ahead and ignore the gorgeous box art for now, but the unboxing experience here on the Para 2 is quite nice. This is just an empty box because inside this you get this Moondrop branded carry case, which houses basically everything that you will need. Inside this, you will find the headphones themselves. You will find a nice little leatherette carry pouch with Moondrop branding on it for the provided cable. And you will also find your typical paperwork. So you get the sort of art book / manual that you have going on here. You get a little quick start guide, and you get a lovely, lovely postcard of that really beautiful box art that they have going on here. This padded travel case features this custom cut foam for the headphones. One thing I will say, however, is if you look at the lid for the case there, that was not done by me. I have not taken these anywhere. I have not used this case. That was just pure shipping damage. And you can see that this also has the same indentations there. If you feel it with your finger, you can feel where the protective foam padding here on the cover has become indented by the screws on the yokes here. So maybe not the sturdiest in terms of crush resistance or fall protection. The other thing that bothers me personally is this is the way they came packaged. Okay, you see the foam insert there like that. If you close this, it's the logical orientation. You sort of put it like that, the zipper there. But the Moondrop branding here at the top is upside down. So for a little while, I had the foam insert pulled out, and I had it put in the other way because it just made more sense to me to have the headphones stored this way, because now the Moondrop logo is here at the bottom and it's actually legible. But then it means that the carry handle's on this side and it opens this way, which, I don't know, neither way is ideal. I send them back, I'll do it this way so that you have fresh padding here and here for the yokes. It's nice that it includes a carry case. I like headphones that do have that inclusion. We'll talk about the rest of the accessories here in a second. So let's chat about the cable. Moondrop on their IEMs has some pretty nice cables, so it's a bit of a shame to sort of look at what they decided to include here on the Para 2. This is a flat 4-wire Linguini style cable. It's not microphonic, but it's also not the greatest feeling cable in the hands. It's a very rubbery feeling cable. It does have some noticeable kinks in it from the factory still that I haven't been able to work out in my usage. You can see a couple there. So it does have some memory to it. It does behave well, but when wrapping it, even roadie wrapping it, it does tend to tangle extremely easily if you're not sort of babysitting it. It isn't the greatest cable in the world. The amp connector here, the very small featureless Y-split, and the headphone connectors all match that sort of plastic sprue motif, but there's no branding on any of them. There's no like fancy writing. You get a very sort of barely visible R and L markings there on that part of the cable. And that's basically it. It's very featureless, honestly. There's no grip on this bit either. 4.4, as y'all saw, to dual 3.5. It does come with a 4.4 to 3.5 adapter that matches the cable, but as you can see, this one also has some kinks from the factory that I haven't been able to work out. The adapter is a bit chewy in terms of how satisfyingly. It goes in and out of the 4.4mm adapter here. I'm sure that will fix itself with time. This cable is honestly fine. I wish that this was modular. Moondrop has really nice modular connectors on the cables for like the Aria and other things, and they have access to nice cables, so I don't know why they would, make the conscious decision to, oh look, a nut, make the conscious decision to include this rather not fantastic cable with the Para 2. Fortunately, it is dual entry 3.5, which means you can basically replace it with anything you'd like. In contrast to the cable, the build and sort of overall quality of the headphone itself is quite premium. The Para 2 has a very nice heft and weightiness to it, and while the sort of headband and yokes appear to be sort of this very thin metal, it is quite strong spring steel they've chosen here, and it feels overall quite sturdy. It doesn't feel like they're going to fall apart on me by shaking them up. The ear cups have not only swivel in this direction, but they have nice amounts of pivot in this direction, so they should fit heads quite nicely. The grills, as you can see, are very, very open with these sort of similarly sized holes dotting the entire surface area for ventilation and that open back nature. These holes can be a little bit difficult to keep clean. The surface is sort of prone to smudging or attracting fingerprints, and the holes can gather dust rather annoyingly. It is a bit of a pain to clean if you don't want to damage the dampening sort of felt layer that is underneath these. So, an air blower would probably be advisable. Just be careful blowing on these because it is a delicate planar membrane back there. You don't want to make it crinkle or wrinkle or anything. So gentle when cleaning these. I personally just kept these covered up whenever I wasn't using them because cleaning this seemed like a major pain. The headband, as you can see, is a click adjust mechanism. I will talk about this a little bit more in the comfort section. There's an easy mod that helps the comfort on some smaller heads, which I will talk about. The coolest feature on these, in my opinion, is the headphone swap mechanism. So you can see the stock ear pads here are angled, and they look a lot like the ones from the Moondrop Cosmo. The coolest thing about these, though, is the attachment mechanism. They're just magnetic with these cool metal rings. You can see the mirror finish on the driver there. Careful, do not get any debris in there. But the fact that the cups are held on with these metal rings means you can just pull the pads off of this metal ring. You can then put felt or other material between the metal ring and the sort of inside of this padding here to tune the headphone how you'd like. It also means that swapping pads is extremely easy and quick. My only complaint with this is I did reach out to Moondrop and I asked, will you sell the sort of rings separately? Because I think it'd be kind of cool to have the rings with different sets of pads. You can sort of hot swap on them. And they said, well, not really, contact your distributor. And none of the distributors that I contacted were like, oh yeah, no, we have those in stock. They're like, we'd have to ask Moondrop to get them. So bit of a non-answer there. The modability of these, as I'll mention later, is one of the strengths of this headphone, and that pad attachment mechanism is honestly the whole reason why it's so easy and simple to mod these. It's a great platform for changing things up. Other things, I wish that the L and R indicators here on the ends were a bit clearer in certain lighting conditions. As you can see, they're a bit difficult to see just because of the technique that they chose to engrave those on there. Not a huge deal. These are angled pads, so you can just sort of tell at a glance whether or not you have them on correctly. You should be able to feel it as well. Overall, the build quality of these is quite nice. It's reminiscent of a lot of the other Moondrop headphones, which are very solid in the build quality department. All right, pulling up the specs for the Para 2 here. These feature the second generation of Moondrop's 100mm planar driver that they use on the original Para. Despite the fact that this is a planar driver, I found these to be relatively easier to drive than I originally thought. These will require around a volt and 125 milliamps to hit 110 dB, which honestly is not that hard to achieve even with budget sources. I didn't have any issues driving these with even the Apple dongle on an iOS device. The clamp force is just shy of 300 grams, which is a little on the lighter side. The pads are pretty large overall, which is nice for my huge ears. The weight, however, is quite hefty at 510 grams for the headphone, not including the cable. This is a pretty weighty headphone, but it's still not as heavy as a chonkster like the Odyssey LCD X, so I wouldn't call these a full-on neck exercise headphone. Besides the weight, the rest of the Para 2 spec sheet reads pretty standard, which is a good thing. Planars are becoming less exotic and more accessible, which I think is a good thing. Time now for the cool wall. I like it when brands have a sort of unified design language for their headphones, and Moondrop here is no exception. The Para 1, the Venus, the Cosmo, even the Horizon, all really follow the sort of same design language. There's different variations on the sort of design of the grills here, on the sort of color, but honestly, it's still pretty good. The choice to go with simple, sort of plain holes here on the ear cups for the Para 2 makes more sense compared to the more interesting design choices on, let's say, the Cosmo or the Venus. But I still think it looks pretty nice. The black leather and stainless steel combo is just classic, and I think that the looks overall are unique enough that I think they'll stand out on a table with like a bunch of other headphones. I'm going to go ahead and put these in cool, since I consider them to be pretty cool, especially in a world filled with, black plastic and sort of plasticky silver things. These stand out quite well just from having really shiny metal and the basic leather accents on the cups. I might think that the Para look kind of classic and cool, but what about the Council of Ladies? We'll go ahead and check in with them and see what they have to say. Do these look nice or cool? Not really. We have 3 votes of not cool or nice looking, 1 yes and 1 meh, so split, but not really. This is a very negative leaning verdict overall. In terms of comments or compliments, we have a score of 4-1 in favor, however, so these aren't to the style of the ladies, but they'll at least start a conversation or get you noticed if you're going to be wearing these. Checking out their thoughts, not really nice things being said here. Scavenged coffee can lids, ridiculously large pot lids, clean and futuristic, but not pretty. Yeah, I think that the size and overall industrial feel of the Para didn't really agree with the sentiments of the ladies too much. Comfort here on the Para 2 is a bit of a mixed bag for me. While these cups are quite large, my ears will either touch the top or bottom of the ear pads depending on where I have the comfort band here set. I tended to have it between sort of 2 and 3 clicks depending on where they were sitting and what part of the ear I wanted to touch. That was what ended up being most comfortable for me. The clamp force here, if I just sort of hold them from here, the clamp force is low enough that the headband was doing most of the heavy lifting. The weight was distributed rather well over the top of the head by this comfort strap here, but if I had them set a bit small, the weight on the top of my ears here did start to sort of fatigue a little bit. I do wish the clamp force was maybe a little bit higher so that the weight hits my ears a little bit less. That's something that you can accomplish. You can go in here and you can bend the steel. Steel likes to be bent. If I owned these, I probably would bend the headband slightly to fit me and my wife a little bit better. The strap here is fine. I do wish it was ventilated. It does tend to get a little bit warm over longer periods of listening, as do those ear cups, but being open back, it's not really bad in a warm-ish room, I will say. The Para 2 isn't exactly a comfortable headphone, I would say, but it's not uncomfortable either, and I was able to wear it for like 2-3 hours at a time without any real issues. Those comfort issues can be easily alleviated by bending the headband or doing a pad swap, so I'm going to give it a pass on comfort because, as I said, I was able to wear it for long listening sessions with no problems besides sort of the weight and the heat. My wife, on the other hand, really didn't like the fit on these at all. She did like the less intense clamp force. She said she probably could have used a little bit more, but this was sort of around the amount that she tends to prefer. The large cups here didn't fit the side of her head at all, and the lower part here did cause some pressure on her jaw, giving her a little bit of pain there. She rated these as straight up uncomfortable even on their smallest setting. She said if there was a smaller setting, she would probably use it. Now, Mark Ryan from Super Reviews did share a hack where if you undo the screws holding the adjustment mechanism in, you can make it so that the comfort band, instead of coming out of the top here, comes out of the bottom and essentially shrinks the size here on the Para 2. Again, this is a loaner unit. If this was my personal unit and my wife wanted to use these more often, I probably would do that to, number one, increase the clamp force for myself, and number two, make the overall headphone smaller so that it fits my wife a little bit easier. Go on there nicely, please. Thank you. But yeah, overall comfort, good but not great. Does have some issues, but they're easily remedied, is what I'll say. Before I get into the sound of the Para 2, I need to talk about why this review took so long, and that is, as I said, the most interesting aspect of this headphone, which is the ease and potential for pad rolling and modifications. The fact that the pad attachment mechanism is magnetic and relies on separate metal discs means that swapping pads and applying damping material between the driver and the pads is a trivial matter. I pad rolled the heck out of these. I basically, if the pad fit those rings, I tried them on here. I'll pull up a graph of some of the different pads that I tried. It was a lot of fun listening. I couldn't truly A/B because I was having to swap the pads, and that did take a little bit, but it was still a lot of fun. The ones that I enjoyed the most of the ones I had were the stock pads from the FiiO FT1 Pro. They made the headphone a bit more neutral, but it did reduce some of that unique flavor that this headphone does have sort of with its native tuning. The only real thing stopping this headphone from becoming a modder's dream is, like I said, you cannot buy those discs separately. So I'd like to appeal to the sort of maker crowd out there. If you have a laser cutter capable of cutting magnetic discs for these, you could make a pretty decent amount of money selling these on eBay or on Reddit or on other places. Just call them, Moondrop hot swap pad discs. They'll fit this, the Horizon, and a couple of the other 100mm Moondrop headphones. Probably make some decent money just cutting up metal circles with holes in them for headphones like this. I have all the measurements, as I said, with the pads that I tried on my Squig link. If you guys want to peruse them, those were taken using my new measurement system, which is using the more industry standard KB501X pinna with the same 711 coupler that I used to measure all of my IEMs. So my measurements are now more consistent and more comparable to what you're seeing from other reviewers is what I'll say, but please don't go comparing my measurements to anyone else's. My rig is different from everyone's. There's variation and everything. So just keep that in mind if you're going to go comparing my Squigs to anybody else's. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the sound of the Para 2 with the default pads. Personally, one of the reasons I love big planar drivers and headphones so much is just how fast and detailed they can be on the low end while still retaining good dynamics and overall texture. You just feel the way they move air. The Para 2 does not disappoint. There's some really good rumble on the low end here. It's very detailed and very resolving in smaller details on the low end. They Might Be Coffee, for example, has those thumpy lower notes that serve as a sort of heartbeat for the song. The attack and decay on those notes was very nice. This bass presentation isn't necessarily boosted, but it's what I would call sort of very controlled. It's a very quality first bass presentation. It being a planar, you could EQ in a decent amount of bass without, getting too distorted, which is what these are sort of good at. Bass guitar and kick drum are very clean and resolute in the mix here. The big echoey bass drum from when the levee breaks is felt on these throughout the entire track, even when the rest of the instruments come in. It has good texture. The echo effect on it from where it was recorded and how it was recorded is all there. It's not the spotlight of this tuning. It doesn't make the bass drum jump forward of the rest of the music, which is a good thing. The bass here is not rolled off. It's not soft. It doesn't lack really in dynamics. It's very good quality bass. It's just not a bassy or warm sounding headphone. Because the bass is essentially neutral and clean, the mids are allowed to come forward nicely. Instruments and vocals do quite well on the Para 2. I do find that the sound can be a hair lean. Bing's version of You Took Advantage of Me, for example, I just wish the Para gave his voice a little bit more depth or gravitas, if you will. It's not a lean or thin vocal presentation for Bing, but I just wish there was a little bit more there. The benefit of that tonality is that instrumental and more acoustic tracks really leap forward in terms of detail. But another side effect of that tonality is that female vocals can come across a bit nasal or honky depending on the track, who's singing and how it's mastering. Reba, for example, in The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, is mostly fine, but there is a little bit of that boxy, nasal, sort of honky tonality that can sneak into her higher, more drawn-out notes on this song. It doesn't ruin the tonality, but it is a coloration that I personally don't enjoy all that much. I know some people will, but it's just something that I don't prefer. Mids and instrument detail on this are a focus of the tuning, in my opinion, and while female vocals do suffer a little bit timbrally speaking, it's not something that ruins the replay overall. The upper mids and treble on the Para 2 are boosted and forward, but not too much. There is some decent energy here. Tawana does sound a little bit thin and unnatural in Aozoda Rhapsody. She's maybe just a hair shouty. I personally don't mind it too much, but if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, you probably will hear it here. The treble overall is pretty excitable, and combined with the bass, the Para 2 has a very delicate, clean, bright sound to it. It's nothing that personally fatigues me, but I am also a lower volume listener who's not particularly that treble sensitive. While there wasn't really anything in my testing that made me reach for the volume knob to turn it down right away, the electronic hi-hats in Vienna Calling were a bit too sharp for me. They were a little spicy here on the Para 2. Nothing that led to instant fatigue, and the Para 2 does have a nice airiness that doesn't get overpowering or grainy, but the Para 2 did tend to lean towards the sort of delicate, brighter, sharper side of the tuning compared to warmth. That leaner, delicate, brighter tune in combination with this planar driver, I feel really helps nuances and details in music sort of come forward. The darker guitar tones, the drums, the vocal subtones that are thrown off by the throat singing in the Who's Sugan Esena, I feel are all recreated beautifully here by the Para 2. While I do wish the vocals did have more heft and body to them, especially with this track, all of the details I typically look for in the terms of vibratory harmonics are all rendered very well here. And it's a similar story with Waltz for Debbie. I didn't miss out on any of the glassware hits or any of the barware moments that I typically listen for. While the background conversation isn't as prominent as I personally like, it's more in line with the original intent here, and that's more of a tuning thing than a sort of indication of the quality of this driver. I think that this headphone easily has the resolution and details of a $500 headphone. I think they did a good job matching or exceeding the sort of performance or dynamics of the original Para, and it's up there with the other planar headphones at this price class. Stereo separation here on the Para 2 is quite nice. You have Alan Paco and Mediterranean Sundance sounding nice and wide. The audience fills in the space in the middle nicely. You get a little bit of room effect going on, and I got no sense of claustrophobia from this presentation at all. The perceived 3D soundstage here is nice and open sounding to me. Well-mastered tracks have some nice, sense of depth to them. I will say, however, compared to some of the more imaging or soundstaging heavy open backs that I've tried, these really aren't anything super amazing by comparison. Danzón for My Father still has good imaging with the piano, the brass, the percussion. They're all very well separated, but it's not quite to the level of some of the other sort of open back planars in this price bracket. It's still leagues better than a closed back or some of the cheaper open backs that I've tried. Just don't be expecting a soundstage monster out of the Para 2 here. The Moondrop Para 2 then. I feel it represents an evolution in the sort of Para line, with most of the difference actually coming courtesy of these Cosmo-inspired earpads. This is a very delicate, bright-leaning, instrumental-focused sort of sound with some tonal affectation to female vocals and some sparkly treble sprinkled on top. As far as open-backed planars go, this is not necessarily a new sound or a radically different tuning, and the Para 2, as a result of that $100 increase, now has quite a bit of competition. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll begin our comparisons by looking at a more affordable set, the hyped up FiiO FT1 Pro, priced at $220 US. The FT1 Pro also comes with an included carry case, but in my opinion, it's a bit more solid and a bit better built than the soft-sided one on the Para 2. This also comes with a second separate cable if you want to go 4.4mm balance versus 3.5, which I do prefer to the whole adapter thing that Moondrop has going on. The cable here is also nicer, but it's not incredibly nicer. In terms of sound, the FT1 Pro here feels a little bit more balanced in terms of sound to me. It's got a little bit more low-end emphasis overall, and while it still has that sort of Hifiman style dip starting at 800 Hz, the boosted harmonics here mean that the vocals don't sound as recessed as they might otherwise. The Para 2 carries a little bit more energy into the upper treble, which helps it come across as a little bit more delicate sounding with that little bit of extra airiness, but the FT1 Pro is brighter in the lower and mid treble, meaning that it comes off to me a little bit more incisive with some instrument and vocal harmonics. I think that the Para 2 resolves instrumental tracks a little bit better than the FT1 Pro does, but it does it at the cost of both soundstage performance and male and female vocal timbre. I think both of those things are better on the FT1 Pro. The Para, in my opinion, is much better built than the more plasticky, lighter weight FT1 Pro, But I did think that the FT1 Pro, at least on my head, was more comfortable over longer sessions than the Para 2. I would say if you prefer a more delicate sort of instrument forward presentation with controlled but still satisfying bass, the Para 2 is worth a look. However, if you want what I think is one of the better values in planar headphones with a more balanced sound with a more satisfying bass, the FT1 Pro is a very solid contender. Next up, we have another sort of value option. It's the Hifiman Edition XS, which has fallen in price to between 200 or 240 bucks, depending on where you're shopping. The Edition XS does not come with a carry case, hard or soft-sided, and the stock cables are also not great. The build is nowhere near as nice as on the Para 2. This has creaky yokes and a famously uncomfortable headband that really only works on large heads without modification. But in terms of sound, I would say the Edition XS is similar overall to the FT1 Pro in that I think it's a bit more balanced than the Para 2. The bass here is quick and detailed and nuanced like the Para 2, but it has more energy and dynamism to it, sort of like the FT1 Pro can have. I tend to prefer male and female vocals here on the XS, but the female vocals aren't as forward as on the Para 2. They are a bit more timbrally correct here on the XS, at least to me, compared to something like the FT1 Pro or the Para 2, but this is relying on the harmonics to carry the sound through rather than the fundamentals. The XS is, to me, much more energetic in the treble compared to the Para 2, so if you're treble sensitive, the Para 2 will be slightly safer in that regard compared to the XS. Sound staging for me is a pretty clear win for the Edition XS. It has more depth and even some verticality to it compared to the Para 2, but that again does come at the cost of a potentially more fatiguing treble presentation here. Now that the XS has fallen in price even more, I think it makes a very compelling value option. Then again, it's always been a great value, even when it was closer to $500. If you've got a larger head, you prioritize Soundstage, and you're okay with sort of Hifiman style build quality, I think that the XS is a very, very compelling value option in today's market. If you are treble sensitive, though, Hifiman has cooked something up recently for you. It is the brand spanking new Edition XV, priced at $400 US. Now, this isn't really a replacement for the Edition XS, and I will have a review coming on this quite soon. For now, just know that Hifiman has made something rather different from their usual house sound here. Whereas the Edition XS was brighter than the Para 2 across the upper mids and treble, the XV sounds less energetic to me and just warmer overall. The Hifiman soundstage dip is there, affecting the female vocals, but the nice bass from the Edition XS is still intact, meaning that this just comes across richer, a bit weightier, and less fatiguing compared to not just this, but every other Hifiman egg-shaped planar. The XV still doesn't come with a carry case, and the stock cables still aren't amazing, but the build quality has been improved. Still isn't quite on the level as the Para 2, however. Smaller heads actually do better with this than on the XS, but the gap in build quality between the XS and the Para 2 has shrunk now that the XV is here with the new headband design. The Para 2 ends up coming across a bit more mids forward to me, especially the upper mids, and it's got better resolution, particularly in that mid-range. It's the more easily modifiable set with that ear pad swapping system, but the stock tuning on the XV is more balanced towards the lower mids or the actual mids. It's warmer overall, it's an extremely balanced presentation, and it is $100 less, which is nice. This is just warm, lovely, and different. We like this one. Video coming soon. For our last comparison, I did want to bring in a dynamic driver set that had sort of a similar mid-range flavor to it. This is the Focal Elex, still available new for around $500 US. The Elex here, to me, sounds just more natural and more hefty to me than the Para 2. It doesn't have the light-footed nature throughout the treble that planar headphones tend to have, but it makes up for that with some epic dynamism, particularly in the mid-bass. The Elex still has some of that vocal forwardness that the Para 2 has, but to my ears, it's more controlled, less honky, and less nasal sounding than the Para 2 can be. The Para 2, I feel, does have the edge in terms of resolution. It has that extra airiness. It's overall brighter and more delicate sounding to me than the Elex, but the Elex matches it in the soundstage department, at least in my experience. It's built well. Some of the early batches did have issues with the magnet wire coming detached from the drivers. That was fixable if you have some soldering skills, but more importantly, that issue has essentially been ironed out of these later batches. I personally think the Elex is pretty comfortable. The headband here not being user replaceable and sort of wearing out is a bit of a bummer. But if you have $500 and you don't want that delicate, detailed planar sound, you instead want something more traditional, a more dynamic, excitable sound that still feels very natural and detailed, I think that the Elex is a great pick. I've reorganized things so we can get everyone on the table for the comparison section. In terms of sort of punchiness and dynamism in the bass, the Elex, in my opinion, is the winner, followed by the FT1 Pro. Then you have a bit of a tie between the XV and the XS, and the Para 2, with its sort of gentler, quality first, sort of delicate approach to the bass, brings up the rear. Bass quality, however, is going to go to the XS and the XV, followed by the FT1 Pro, and then the Para 2. The Elex brings up the rear here because being an open back dynamic, it does have that extremely common sort of sub-bass roll-off that open back dynamics tend to have. In terms of detail and technical performance, this is going to be extremely subjective. It's going to be based on where you personally hear detail or you perceive detail in your tracks. In my opinion, I could see either of these three winning the sort of detail championship for you, the Para 2, the FT1 Pro, or the XS. The XV is a little bit behind due to the warmer tuning, and the Elex, I would say, is not too far behind that. These differences are a lot smaller than you would think. Don't stress out too much about that. Soundstage is also super subjective. For me, it's going to go to the XS. It just has a little bit of extra height and depth compared to everything else. Then you have the FT1 Pro. And then it's sort of a three-way tie between the XV, the Para 2, and the Elex. These three have sort of similar staging width and depth. This is a bit of a step up, and then this is the winner, at least for me, in the way I perceive Soundstage. Then you have sort of treble energy and potential fatigue issues. Those are going to be highest on the XS. It's sort of famously fatiguing. People try these out and sort of return them because they can't stand how bright they are. Then it's going to be the FT1 Pro in terms of brightness, then the Para 2, and then in my opinion, the XV and the Elex here are generally quite warm. I honestly really like all of these headphones. I own all of them except for the Para 2, which is on loan, and the XV, which is also on loan, but I'm probably going to end up buying one of these. Do have a review for these coming up. I would say if you own any of these, you have a great set of cans, and you should be happy with them. They're all winners, in my opinion. So, it is now time to bring up the Audio Amigo arbitrary rating scale and figure out where the Para 2 here is going to end up on it. The Para 2 has a lot going for it. The build quality is really nice. The technical performance, I think, is excellent. And the ease of pad swaps and damping wads here is just so much fun to play around with. All of that said, the Para 2 isn't perfect. It's not the most comfortable headphone for like 3+ hours of wearing. And the sound, while very detailed and delicate and clean, isn't the most dynamic sounding thing in the world. It does something interesting with vocals. It pushes them forward and makes them a bit unnatural, which is not something I prefer, but I know some people will really appreciate the way that this handles female vocals in particular. Of course, this is a planar, which means it takes to EQ like a duck to water, but then again, so do all of the competing planars that we've looked at today. In my opinion, what truly separates the Para 2 from the competition is just the ease of these modifications and pad swaps. It is so easy to just like stick a piece of paper towel in here or buy some acoustic foam and put it between the disc and these pads. Rolling the pads, one after the other is extremely easy. You just put them on the discs. It's so easy to mess with this. You can turn down the treble if it bothers you. You can boost the bass by playing around with the pads. You can even iron out that sort of mid-range honkiness that's my main complaint with the female vocals. I think it's really easy. The comfort can be fixed with a multi-bit screwdriver and some bending. Honestly, all of these things added up together, I'm going to put the Para 2 in the but I like this tier. The stock tuning might not be 100% to my tastes, but it's still very good. The technical performance is there, and as a sort of starting point for your headphone modification journey, I think it makes so much sense if that's what you're going to be using it for. I can also see people who would buy this for the stock sound, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So, who do I think should be buying the Para 2? Well, honestly, if you're looking for absolute bang for your buck in a planar headphone, I don't think this is it. The FT1 Pro and the Edition XS are just such good value. You cannot ignore them. They're less than half the price of this for essentially the same, if not slightly better, technical performance. This also is not for treble-sensitive listeners. If you're looking for a planar, while it's not as excitable as, for example, the Ananda or the Edition XS, it's still a good bit brighter than most of the neutral dynamic driver headphones like the Elex or the HD6XX. If, however, you don't mind the treble, you're looking for a planar, and you like to play around with pad swaps and try foam and damping mods, the driver that Moondrop put here in the Para 2 is a wonderful place to start your tweaking journey. I think it can make a really good option with the stock signature if you mostly listen to sort of instrumental music or very specific genres of female vocals where the sort of honky, like slightly nasal tonality works. I think if you like those genres and you like very clean, fast, accurate bass, this can be a fantastic headphone if you listen to that type of music. Lastly, if you're a Moondrop fan, if you wanted a set of Moondrop headphones to go with the rest of your Moondrop gear, I think that for the price, these are a very worthy set. They're a really solid buy, in my opinion. And that's that. The Para 2, a solid planar with some great options for customizability, modding, and a stock tuning that I think is pretty decent. I just wish it was a little bit more affordable. I think if this was closer to like $400 US, it would be more competitive, especially considering all of the like new planars that are going to be hitting the market here in a little bit, especially those new Hifiman ones. Speaking of those new Hifiman ones, next on the Headphone Hoedown, we're going to be taking a look at that Edition XV that I had on the table earlier. It's the new black sheep of the Hifiman family, at least as far as tuning goes. For now, however, thank you also very much for watching. Massive shout out to my Compadres Club members. $5 a month, you get to decide what I review with your money. You help make the channel more independent and less reliant on samples and tours, which I personally really appreciate. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.